No, they're still in New Jersey. I think she said Friday. A little bit. No, no. No, I mean, I have to see how much I have. I didn't do as much as I did last year. So I should see how much I have. No, I just do. I've done walnut in the past. This year, I just let it get away. It got too warm. Walnut's a little harder because the tree produces less. So you need to have more. Any hardwood. Yeah, any hardwood you can get sap from. It's just a matter of one, should you, and two, is it like All right, good evening. Welcome. Good to see everybody this evening. I'll open us up in a word of prayer, and then we'll jump into it. So, Father, thank you for this evening, time to once again spend time in your word, going through the book of Psalms. Help it to enrich all of us here, all of those online, to learn, to grow in their walk with you through their journey through the book of Psalms, through that flow of thought, through that narrative of the book, to apply it to their lives, to see where it fits, to meditate on it. Like the psalmist in Psalm chapter 1, meditating on it day and night regularly, to the point that we meditate, that it's that murmuring, that we're thinking about it so much that we're almost talking to ourselves, repeating the truth to ourselves, reminding it, speaking truth in our heart. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. I still need to go through and read your observations. I just haven't, my bad, just haven't got around to it. If you're online, I don't think anyone has emailed me if you're online, so you need to email me, and Sam will send out an email too reminding you of what you need to do. All right, so we're picking up with Psalm 93 today. All right, in the book of Psalms, as the ancient rabbis said, just as Moses gave us 5, David gave us 5. So what is book 2 consist of? 42 to 72. What is book 4? 90 to 106. And that kind of, you can deduce the other ones, I guess. Book 5? 107 to 150. Book 1? 1 to 41. And then, of course, book 3? 73 to 89. Right. So I've been trying to convince you that the 5 books follow the 5 acts of a narrative framework. So within narrative theory, Act 1 of a narrative does what? Right, the introduction, it introduces the characters as well as the conflict, the animosity, who's the protagonist, who's the antagonist. So who are our 5 main characters in the book? Messiah, the wicked, the righteous, the kings of the earth, the leaders of the earth, leaders of the nations, and Yahweh, right? Yahweh is, of course, God. He's creator. He's the one who's over it all. It's ultimately his story. And then humanity is divided into 2 groups of people. The wicked and the righteous is how the book of Psalms formulates that into its worldview, right? That there are wicked and then there's righteous, and you're either part of this group or this group. There's no middle ground, right? Just right. In the New Testament era, we might say believer, unbeliever, but in the worldview of the Psalter, it's the wicked and the righteous. The righteous are led by Messiah. In terms of the history, that would be the Israelite king, the anointed one. Remember, Messiah, Christ, just means the anointed one. And so in the book of Psalms, that's referring to the Davidic kings. Right? They're supposed to lead the righteous. They're supposed to be the example of righteousness for the people. And ultimately, within the grander story, the one who will lead the people is going to be the Messiah, right, capital M, Jesus Christ. And then you have the wicked being led by the rulers of the earth, or the kings of the earth, the rulers, who lead them in their rebellion, lead them in their wickedness. And they have that clash with Messiah. So that's introduced in book 1. Who our main characters are. It's mainly written from David's perspective, just as introductory. He writes the vast majority of book 1, even the Psalms that we don't have a title, like Psalm 2 or Psalm 10, we can accredit Psalm 2 we can most likely accredit to David from Peter's quotation in the book of Acts. But even if Peter's not making a polemic argument about authorship, because he could just be ascribing it to David because it's a psalm, and that wouldn't be that wouldn't be going against inerrancy or anything. He's not trying to make a polemic about actual authorship. So you could any Jew in the time, if you probably referenced Psalm 72, even though it says written by Solomon, if they said of David, it's just because they're quoting the book of Psalms. Like they're not making a polemic about authorship. They're just referencing the Psalter. And it was common Jewish practice to refer to the whole Psalter as David's. Again, just as Moses gave us 5, David gave us 5. Even though we know David did not compile the entire book of Psalms for obvious reasons. Psalm 89, it's very clear that the Davidic kingdom seems to have failed. And something like Psalm, was that 138, 139? No, 138. The reference to being in Babylon. So, of course, David did not compile the totality of the book. But David writes in the vast majority of Book 1, and it's introducing who the main characters are. Within the second act of a narrative, or in this case, Book 2, what does the second act of a narrative do? Correct. The conflict, the escalation. It's the escalation of the conflict. So in regards to Book 2, we're going to see all of a sudden the nations take more of a presence. You see more of a rise of that animosity and tension, particularly with the 50s, 50s and into the 60s, where all of a sudden you see all those particular enemies of David. Like the one is the Zephonites, and then it's his friend, and then the stranger, and the Philistines. Not in that order, but we have all those presence of his enemies. So you see a rise of the conflict. And then Book 3, or Act 3 of a narrative presents our, what? Right, it's the climax with a narrative. It's the climax, and when it comes to the Psalter, it's the perceived failure of the Davidic covenant. It's a tragedy, like our hero. Where's our hero? Like, what happened to our hero? But also we see that within that the hope, because like we were reading in 78, it's the historical lesson, right? That God was gracious. He was always there for them. And then he abandoned Shiloh. And then after a period of time, he awoke. He awoke as a one awakes from a sleep. 78, verse 65. He awakes from a sleep. It's like a warrior who wakes up having been overcome with wine. Like all of a sudden he's like, whoa, I'm going to take action now. And that's what the Lord does when he chooses David to shepherd the people out of the integrity of his heart. And so that historical lesson is then also the future lesson. And Jeremiah particularly picks up that concept, because within Jeremiah's day, when they think they're being faithful, we went and read some of those one of those passage, was it Jeremiah 7, I think, where the Lord says, like, who cares that you kept the sacrifices, but then you went and you did the high places and you offered everything to every god. I think in Jeremiah it says the number of your gods are the number of your cities, O Judah, right? They got a God for everything. And so that lesson of Psalm 78 is something that they're still looking forward to later in the Davidic kingdom. When it seems that the kingdom has failed, they're still waiting for the Lord to awake again, in that sense, because he applies that lesson from Jeremiah 7, which is like, if you think I won't destroy this place, go look at Shiloh. Like, I abandoned Shiloh. And so he's like, I'll do it again. I don't need this. I don't need the sacrifices. Because even when we're in Psalm like 50 and 51, yeah, they're still supposed to keep the sacrifices, but the sacrifices aren't the point. Right? They're still supposed to do it under the old covenant. So the Lord in those passages isn't saying don't do the sacrifices correctly, but you're supposed to do them properly, not just by the letter of what you're doing, but with a broken and contrite heart. Even going back to Samuel. To heed is better than to obey is better than sacrifice. To heed is better than to obey is better than sacrifice. To heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. So that concept was already there. Right, so book 3 is the tragic climax because it looks like everything has failed, but there's still that positive lesson and looking forward to the anointed one who's going to come. Book 4, right, within, and Act 4 within narrative construct, what does Act 4 begin to do? Right, it's gonna, in terms of just narrative, it's starting to de-escalate the conflict in regards to the book of Psalms. We're gonna de-escalate, not we, but the compilers de-escalating that conflict of the perceived failure of the Davidic empire by reshifting the focus on the Lord's sovereignty, that he is still king, he is still high and lifted up, he is still ruling, he still reigns. And so even when it looks like the political drama on the earth is out of whack, it's still divine providence that's going on. He's still in control of that. So even though we might see political drama on the news, social media, we have to take a step back and see divine providence working. And again, I just love alliteration and switching things. So, if anyone caught that. And so, book 4 starts to de-escalate. It starts to focus our gaze on the Lord's kingdom, and then we're gonna then reintroduce David. Right, and then book 5 or Act 5 within a narrative. Right, the resolution. It starts to tie the strings of the story together, piece it together. And so that's what book 5 is going to do, because we're going to see the return of the king, looking forward to Messiah coming back and establishing that kingdom, because we see 5 times throughout the book this master plot, right, which is the wicked rebel against Messiah, or they oppress the righteous, because again, Messiah and the righteous are intertwined. What happens to the people happens to Messiah. What happens to Messiah happens to the people. Right, they're intertwined. So you have that wicked oppression of the righteous of Messiah, and then you have the Lord establish, enthrone Messiah over the wicked and the righteous, and then that results in 2 things. One, Messiah leading the people in proper worship, and also administering justice over the wicked. And we see this 5 times. We see it twice in book 1, twice in book 2, and then we see it overarching from book 3 through book 5. And that's the major story within the book of Psalms. But then 1 and 2 function as our introduction, 146 and 150 function as our conclusion, and that's like our framing narrative. And what story did I compare that to? What movie? Saving Private Ryan. Because Saving Private Ryan, it opens with him going to the graveyard, and you're like, what's going on? And then it picks up, and now you know, oh, this is Private Ryan who's going to the graveyard, and you understand why he's emotional about being there, and he's sharing that moment with his family. It's a smaller framing narrative there, but within that framing narrative, 1 and 2, it's a millennial story. Right, that Psalm 2, the nations rebel against him. The Lord recognizes that rebellion, then he puts down that rebellion. And blessed is everyone who submits to that. And the whole story of the Psalter is really about Messiah's enthronement. So that's where we're going to get, and then we're going to go back to the framing narrative of him ruling in the midst of his enemies, administering justice over the wicked, and leading the people in righteousness. So the entire narrative, the entire story of the book of Psalms is inherently premillennial. And we looked at some of those passages, Psalm 72, 144, 132 to 110, where you have that picture of Messiah reigning, where it's something not now, but it's also not the eternal state. Particularly, it's not now, because there are aspects where we see the beginning of the reversal of the curse. We see the abundance of the physical blessing of his reign, the produce particularly of the ground, of the crops, with Psalm 72, 144. It's not the eternal state, because we see that he rules in the midst of his enemies, 110, 72. The existence in 72 of the oppressed, that he's administering justice for the oppressed. So it's like there has to be this time in between that the Psalter's really focusing on in terms of that Davidic reign. So it's not millennial kingdom, it's not now, so it's this other Davidic reign that is being expected. Again, so and we're not going down the complete road of millennial discussion, but I don't need Revelation 20 to be a premillennialist. I only need Revelation 20 to tell me how long that period is. So I guess I do need it to be a millennial to know it's 1,000 years, but I don't need it to say there's a future reign coming. Like I know that. Like I expect that. So when I get to Revelation 20, it's just like, oh, it's okay. It's 1,000 years and then the eternal state. Awesome. Right, but I don't need Revelation 20 to be a premillennialist. So we're picking back up. Book 4. Book 4 reveals the Lord remaining in sovereign control over Israel's theocracy as he calls them to covenant faithfulness, 90 to 92. Again, that picture of the Mosaic covenant reminding them of Moses, because the failure historically of the Davidic Empire and the Davidic kings is a Mosaic problem. So the Davidic covenant is inherently unconditional. The Lord's not going to break it. He's going to bring it about, as he'll say with the Davidic covenant, as he says in describing that in Psalm 89, as he says in connection to the new covenant in Jeremiah 29 through 33, that he, just as if you could break the covenant with if you could break the concept of the moon and the sun rotating around the earth, if you could break that, then you can break the Davidic covenant. Right, implicit that you can't break it. Like if you can't stop the moon or the sun from rising in the east and setting in the west. Right, the day that the sun rises in the west and sets in the east is the day that you can break the Davidic covenant. Right, David will not lack a man to sit on the throne, just like Levi won't lack a man. Right, and so you see that repeated both in Psalm 89 and then in Jeremiah in connection to the new covenant. So the Davidic covenant is unconditional, like it's unbreakable. It's going to be fulfilled. But also within the Davidic covenant, within the historicity of it, you have conditional elements. Because even there he says, if he sins, I'll discipline him with a rod of iron. As, of course, the Davidic covenant, the Davidic kings would eventually do. Right? And so when they followed the Mosaic covenant, there was blessing, there was the joy of the people when the kings were leading them in righteousness and whatnot. But when they weren't, there was judgment and whatnot. So there's conditional elements within the history of the Davidic kingdom, Davidic empire. And so book 4, as we begin to de-escalate the conflict, the Davidic problem, the perceived failure of the Davidic empire, particularly laid out in chapter 89, the problem is Mosaic. And so it's more than mere coincidence that the immediate psalm following Psalm 89 is Psalm 90, written by Moses. Because the Davidic problem is a Mosaic problem. And also, 7 references to Moses within the Psalter? 6 of them will occur within book 4, because it's reorienting our focus on the Mosaic covenant. Like, Israel, your problem isn't whatever you think the problem is. The problem is that you're not obeying the Mosaic covenant. You're not in covenant obedience. And so it's redirecting that. So he's calling them to covenant faithfulness in 90 to 92. Then he's going to comfort them with his sovereignty in 93 to 100. Particularly, we're going to see a focus on the Lord's reign. Right? If you just look at Psalm 93, Yahweh reigns. He is clothed with majesty. Yahweh has clothed and girded himself with strength. Indeed, the world is established, it will not be shaken. Your throne is established from of old. You are from everlasting. The rivers are lifted up, O Yahweh. The rivers have lifted up their voice. The rivers lift up their pounding waves more than the voices of many waters, than the mighty breakers of the sea. Yahweh on high is mighty. Your testimonies are very faithful. Holiness befits your house, O Yahweh, forevermore. 94, O Yahweh, God of vengeance, shine forth. Be lifted up, O Judge of the earth. Render recompense to the proud. How long shall the wicked, O Yahweh? How long shall the wicked exult? They pour forth words, they speak arrogantly. All workers of iniquity vaunt themselves. They crush your people, O Yahweh, and afflict your inheritance. They slay the widow and sojourner and murder the orphans. They have said, Yah does not see, nor does the God of Jacob discern. Discern, you senseless among the people. And when will you have insight, you fools? He who planted the ear, does he not hear? He who informed the eye, does he not see? He who disciplines the nations, will he not rebuke? Even he who teaches man knowledge. Yahweh knows the thoughts of man, that they are vanity. Blessed is the man whom you discipline, O Yah, and whom you teach out of your law, and that you may grant him calm from the days of calamity until a pit is dug for the wicked. For Yahweh will not abandon his people, nor will he forsake his inheritance, for judgment will again be righteous, and all the upright in heart will follow it. Who will arise for me against the evildoers? Who will take his stand for me against workers of iniquity? If Yahweh had not been my help, my soul would soon have dealt in the abode of silence. If I should say, my foot has stumbled, your hesed, O Yahweh, will hold me up. When my anxious thoughts multiply within me, your consolations delight my soul. Can a throne of destruction be allied with you, one which forms trouble by statute? They band themselves together against the life of the righteous and condemn the innocent of death to death. But Yahweh has been my stronghold and my God, the rock of my refuge. He has brought back their iniquity upon them, and they will destroy them in their evil. Yahweh our God will destroy them. Again, pointing back, 93:1, Yahweh reigns, pointing back to the fact that he is in sovereign control, right, that he has that authority over the earth. 94:2, that he is the judge of the earth. And people, verse 7, they say, Yah does not see, nor does the God of Jacob discern. Remember, Yah, this translation translates Yah and Yahweh, or transliterates them instead of taking it as Lord. Remember, Yah is just an abbreviation for Yahweh. So when you hear me say that, that's what it is. It's just the author is using it as an abbreviation. Most likely a poetic one. Right? If you have a time within Hebrew, it gets rid of a syllable. Yah will also appear in a number of names. Jeremiah, Elijah, stuff like that. So any time you have Yah, Mariah, the meaning has Yah in it.
There's no credit for the author. Can we assume that these were all written by David?
We cannot. We have no idea who wrote them. Right, Elijah. Right, Eli. El is God. The I is often the possessive. So Eli, my God. Jah is just that. It's that Yah abbreviation. So Elijah, my God is Yah. So my God is Yahweh. It's the meaning of the word Elijah. Even Daniel, technically Daniel, 3 syllables. Dan, judge. I, my prefix. El, God. My judge is God. God is my judge. So just that abbreviation of Yah. But that refocusing in 93 and 94 again on his sovereignty. Right, in these Psalms, the people cry out to their king, 93 and 94, and even question whether he has abandoned them in Psalm 95. Right, Psalm 95. Oh, come, let us sing for joy to Yahweh. Let us make a loud shout to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a loud shout to him with songs of praise. For Yahweh is a great God, and a great king above all gods, in whose hand are the depths of the earth. The peaks of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for it is he who made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before Yahweh our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, as in the day of Massah in the wilderness, when your fathers tried me. Verse 9, they tested me, though they had seen my work. For 40 years I loathed that generation. And they said, they are a people who wander in their heart, and they do not know my ways. Therefore I swore in my anger, they shall never enter into my rest. Again, they're not supposed to be like that first generation. That first generation is always that lesson that they're supposed to learn from. To not be like them. That generation, Psalm 95, verse 10, for 40 years I loathed that generation. I always think of, I love Christmas movies, so I always think of The Grinch with Jim Carrey, that movie. Because in that movie, he takes out the phone book, and he names the Who's. He's like, I hate you. And then he says, letter of who? I hate you. And then he's like, hate, double hate, loathe entirely. That's God when it comes to that first generation of Israel who comes out of Egypt. If it wasn't for Moses' intercession from the human perspective, God was just like, move over, Moses, I will wipe them out, and I will restart with you. And I'll still be faithful. It's like, he still would have been faithful to the Abrahamic covenant. Like, he could have done it. Because there's no other covenant in between Abraham and, well, he's already given the Mosaic covenant, but it doesn't require the rest of Israel. He can just restart with Moses. Like, he's not violating anything. He just restart. And that's why where Moses appeals to his glory. Like, and what is glory? We use the term, but what is glory? What is glory? His reputation. It's him. I like that one. What else? Anything? Those are both correct. I'm just seeing what else you got. It's interesting, in Hebrew it connects to the word weight. It's his weightiness. It's his reputation. It's like, both of those answers were great. It's him. It's who he is. It's what identifies him as him. It's what gives him weight. It's, in terms of the broader Hebrew concept, it's what gives you weight. His does, yes, because his glory is so great. To use another movie example, I think of Back to the Future, because Marty is always like, that's heavy, Doc, that's heavy. And Doc's always like, in the future, does the gravitational pull of the earth change or something? Because you keep saying everything's heavy. But that concept connecting to because in the Hebrew, the word glory connects to the word for weight, what gives its weightiness. So I always think of that, like, it's heavy, because it's like, it has meaning, it has significance, it has value. It's his reputation. It's who he is. So even something when we get to, and I think about that when we get to, was it Romans? For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Sin is falling short of his glory. It's falling short of him. Like, he in his own person is the standard. Sin is anything that falls short of him and who his character. Because some people will frame it in terms of the law, but then you get in the weird conversation about the Mosaic law and the law in the church and the law of Christ and the law of Moses. But sin is ultimately, you didn't meet the standard of him, of who he is, of his glory, of his reputation, of what gives him weightiness. I don't know why the slide is here, but it just shows you some connections between 93 and 94. So in 93, we began with that phrase, he reigns, but we're going to focus even more on that in 96 and 99. Because the Lord answers by declaring his sovereign, his kingship, right? And he's comforting his people with that implication of his sovereignty, namely his faithfulness that we'll come back to in 100. But 96, sing to Yahweh a new song. Sing to Yahweh all the earth. And even that new song concept does take you to Revelation 5, sing a new song. It's very end of days ish. Right, sing to Yahweh all the earth. Sing to Yahweh, bless his name. Proclaim good news of his salvation from day to day. Recount his glory among the nations, his wondrous deeds among all the peoples. And even there you see that parallel between his glory and his wondrous deeds. Because again, it's what gives him weightiness, both in who he is by nature, but also who he is in terms of what he's done and his reputation of his wondrous deeds. Because that's, again, what Moses appeals to in his prayer. Like, what will the Egyptians say? Like, yes, the Lord you'd still be faithful to the Abrahamic covenant if you wiped them all out and you just had me and we restarted. Like, the Lord wouldn't be violating anything. But what will Egypt say? What about your glory? What about your reputation? Because then Egypt's going to be like, you couldn't even keep him alive. Like, ooh, he did all that, and then he just killed them all. So the Lord's like, I'm over-dramatizing. So like, oh, fine. Like, I'll let him live for 40 years. But he loathed that generation. But I think that connection of his glory to his deeds. And that concept of praise and worship. And that's one thing that's different for our worship, is that we're worshiping him not just for who he is, but primarily for what he's done. Both historically, creation, the Exodus, Egypt, or Israel's history, but then, of course, the greatest wondrous deed would be the cross and the resurrection and the ascension. And that's what we're praising him for. And even that concept of worship, our worship compared to angelic worship, right? Because angels can worship him for who he is. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, right? But what can angels not worship him for? Right, redemption, like his deed, what he's done. There's an old song, holy is the Lord, the angels sing all around the throne of God eternally. But one day they'll silently listen to me sing Amazing Grace. And in the chorus talks about how, they sing around the throne eternally. They don't know the words to love lifted me. Right? They can sing holy, 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 but they can't sing and can it be. Right? Those concepts are foreign to them. As the author of Hebrews says, they long to look in. Like, they look and they're like, we don't get it. Right? He provided no redemption for the demons when they fell. He only provided redemption for Adam, for Adam's race. Verse 4, for great is Yahweh and greatly to be praised. He is more fearsome than all gods. For all the gods of the people are idols, but Yahweh made the heavens. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. Right, Yahweh himself, he made the gods. He's the king of all the gods. We read that in, 93? Or was it 94? No, one of those. But actually it was 95. 95 verse 3, 4. Right, he sits above all of them. Right, he made the heavens. He made all the principalities and the powers. Verse 7, ascribe to Yahweh, O families of the peoples. Ascribe to Yahweh glory and strength. Ascribe to Yahweh the glory of his name. Lift up an offering and come into his courts. Worship Yahweh in the splendor of his holiness. Tremble before him, all the earth. Say among the nations, Yahweh reigns. Again, this theme that's in these as we start to de-escalate the conflict and focus on the fact that he is in sovereign control. Say among the nations, Yahweh reigns. Indeed, the world is established, it will not be shaken. He will render justice to the peoples with equity. Let the heavens be glad and let the earth rejoice. Let the sea roar as well as its fullness. Let the field exult and all that is in it. Then all the trees of the forest will sing for joy before Yahweh, for he is coming. For he is coming to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples in his faithfulness. By this fact that he is coming. He's coming to administer justice. He's coming to administer his reign, to establish his kingship visibly on the earth. And we know that's going to be through the Davidic reign from Psalm 2, but he's coming to do this. And the earth itself knows. We're going to see in these chapters, we're going to see it in, we've read some of them in the weeks past, but like, 113, 114. Creation knows he is coming. And creation itself starts to tremble. The earth itself trembles because he is coming. Right, this is why, right, there'll be rumors of wars, and there's going to be more earthquakes, right, and whatnot, as Christ talks about before he comes. Right, because the earth itself knows he is coming, and it's child pains. Like the earth knows, and so these things like earthquakes are going to increase before he comes. And I mean, I work in environmental stuff, but it's like when it comes to climate change, we won't go down that whole conversation. But it's like, yeah, it's happening. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen even more. But it's not because we're eating too many cows. It's not because, whatever. And we should, of course, manage the earth. Like, we don't want to be premillennial, and we don't want to be so thoughtful about the earth when it comes to he's going to reign physically on the earth one day, and new creation model in terms of the new creation. Like, we don't want to be premillennial and new creation model people in our theology, but then amillennialists in how we actually interact with the earth now. Because a lot of people are. Like, you're premillennial, but you're amillennial when it comes to actually taking care of the earth now. You're just like, oh, we'll take care of the earth then. Like, but side conversation. Sorry, tangent. But the earth knows he's coming, and we see this. We see this with Sinai when his feet touch Sinai. And there's lightning, and there's darkness, and there's clouds, and Psalm 18 talks about, and we'll get there again with 13 or 14, 113, 114, when like they're coming out of Egypt and they're coming to the river, and it talks about how like it personifies the river as like it stands up in a heap. The mountains skip like rams and the hills skip like lambs because he's coming. So like creation knows he's coming. And it's like, oh, here he comes. But again, you connect that to Romans 8 and how creation longs for the revealing of the sons of God, the redemption. Creation itself longs for redemption to occur for humanity because it knows it's getting redeemed. Like it knows it gets to go through new creation. It's longing to be released from the curse. And so creation knows. I love those verses in 11 through 14, right? The heavens be glad, let the earth rejoice, and the sea roars. The fields exult, and the trees of the forest will sing for joy. You can connect that to Isaiah, where it talks about the trees of the forest will clap their hands. Again, whether that's, I don't think you could even make a decision, but is that a reference to the leaves, like the branches hitting each other, so the clappingness, like is it more on the motion of clapping? Because that's when the wind blows, it kind of creates that. Or is it on the fact that they'll clap their hands, that noise? Because if it's more on the noise, and I don't think you could make an interpretive decision. Just wait for a windy day and live near ash trees, and you'll hear crack and like so. If it's emphasis on when he comes, the trees of the forest will clap. is it emphasis on the sound? Because that's not just the leaves brushing together like this. That's boom. That's like crack, and But there's a lot of passages like that creation knows he's coming, and it intensifies. 97, Yahweh reigns. Again, this emphasis, and the reason we're reading through these, right? Because this is starting to de-escalate the conflict, not just in the narrative of the book of Psalms, but this is what de-escalates the conflict within our own individual lives. Yahweh reigns. Right? Even when I'm going through the worst time in my life, Yahweh reigns. Right? He's still in sovereign control. Yahweh reigns, verse 1, let the earth rejoice, let the many coastlands be glad. And we're going to see some of this creation language as it connects to his coming. Clouds and thick darkness are all around him. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. Fire goes before him, burns up his adversaries all around. His lightning lit up the world, and the earth sees and trembles. The mountains melt like wax at the presence of Yahweh, at the presence of the Lord of all the earth. The heavens declare his righteousness, and all the people see his glory. And I do also love this translation because of verse 5. Right, the mountains melt like wax at the presence of Yahweh. And again, that picture of what creation does when it sees him coming. But then the second, at the presence of the Lord of all the earth. And again, I like this translation because it's not translating Yahweh as Lord, because otherwise you get the mountains melt like wax at the presence of the Lord of all the earth. So the second phrase, the second Lord, if you have a translation that takes both of those as Lord, right? Your first one's in all capitals because it's actually at the presence of Yahweh, the divine name. But then at the presence of the Lord of all the earth. It's the emphasis because he's not saying Yahweh, he's saying Adonai. He is the master, he's the Lord of all the earth, the one, the possessor, the master of it, the one who owns it, the one who has full authority over that. Right, the presence of the Lord of all the earth. Again, emphasizing that title aspect of Lord. Verse 7, let all those be ashamed who serve graven images, who boast of idols. Worship him, all you gods. Zion heard this and was glad, and all the daughters of Judah have rejoiced because of your judgments, O Yahweh. For you are Yahweh, most high, over all the earth. You are exalted far above all gods. Right, all the principalities, the powers are commanded there in verse 7 to worship him, and he's exalted above all of them. Okay, going back to 95 and others in these verses, going back to 96, verse 4, and there's another reference I'm not seeing. The fact that he created them, that he's the king over all of them. He's the great king above all gods, 95 verse 3. Right? He has authority over them. Right? He's the God of gods. He's the one who created them. Verse 10, hate evil, you who love Yahweh, who keeps the souls of his holy ones. He delivers them from the hand of the wicked. Light is sown for the righteous and gladness for the upright in heart. Be glad in Yahweh, you righteous ones, and give thanks for the remembrance of his holy name. Verse 98, sing to Yahweh a new song, for he has done wondrous deeds. His right hand and his holy arm have worked out his salvation. Yahweh has made known his salvation. He has revealed his righteousness in the eyes of the nations. He has remembered his hesed and his faithfulness to the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. Make a loud shout to Yahweh, all the earth. Break forth and sing for joy. Sing praises to Yahweh with the lyre, and with the lyre and the sound of singing, with the trumpets and the sound of the horn. Make a loud shout before King Yahweh. Let the sea roar as well as its fullness, the world and those who dwell in it. Let the rivers clap their hands and the mountains sing together for joy before Yahweh, for he is coming to judge the earth. He will judge the world with righteousness and the peoples with equity. Right, very similar themes to some of those other couple psalms that we just read. Right, the fact that he reigns, that he's over it, that requires us to sing a new song, something that is, again, inherently eschatological, when he has established his nation, his kingship over all the earth for everyone to see. Right, verse 2, in the eyes of the nations. Because he is high and lifted up, he's sovereign, he's the king, but he's going to establish that kingdom one day on the earth. And that's going to be through the Davidic reign. And then verse 7 through 9, we see, again, similar themes, that creation itself has a reaction when he comes. Because creation itself knows he is coming to judge the earth. And he is coming. Then 99, we continue this theme that Yahweh reigns. Verse 1, Yahweh reigns, let the peoples tremble. He sits enthroned above the cherubim, let the earth quake. Yahweh is great in Zion, and he is exalted above the peoples. Let them praise your great and awesome name. Holy is he, the strength of the king loves justice. You have established equity. You have done justice and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt Yahweh our God, and worship at the footstool of his feet. Holy is he. Moses and Aaron were among his priests, and Samuel was among those who called on his name. They would call upon Yahweh, and he would answer them. He would speak to them in the pillar of the cloud, and they kept his testimonies and the statute that he gave them. O Yahweh our God, you answered them. You were a forgiving God to them, and yet an avenger of their evil deeds. Exalt Yahweh our God, and worship at his holy mountain. For holy is Yahweh our God. Then Psalm 100, a psalm of thanksgiving. Make a loud shout to Yahweh, all the earth. Serve Yahweh with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that Yahweh, he is God. It is he who made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving, the court and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name. For Yahweh is good. His hesed endures forever, and his faithfulness from generation to generation. And there's some ties from 95 back to Psalm 100. From 100 back to 95. Again, that reference, we are the people of his pasture, the sheep of his hand. But there where 95 looked back to that first generation as a warning, that generation that he loathed. 100 kind of looks forward to his faithfulness, to him continuing to be faithful, to his hesed that endures forever. And again, we've referenced it, but that concept, his hesed endures forever. Hesed by its nature endures forever. You don't have to say hesed endures forever. So the fact that he does it is an overemphasis, because hesed by its nature endures forever. So it's this emphasis on let's come together as a people, because he, just reflecting on the Psalms we read, like he reigns, he is our God, he is God. So let's come together with thanksgiving, with praise, give thanks, for he is good, right? And he's going to be faithful from generation to generation. So whereas 95 had similar themes and it looked back with a warning, 100 looks forward to his faithfulness. Right, so these Psalms 93 through 100, right, they give the reader assurance that Yahweh remains in sovereign control, right, that he reigns. We see this in 93. We read this in 93:1, 96:10, 97:1, 99:1, right, and that he will indeed judge the world with equity. 96:10, 13, 98:9, where we see those references to the fact that he's going to judge the peoples with equity. Right, and if you work in government, that's a hot commodity right now. Let's have, justice and equity and social justice and all that fun stuff. If you want to, never mind. I can't go down that road. It's this big discussion. It's just like, it will never happen with sinful man that you actually have equity administered properly. There's only one. And he's coming to judge the earth and to establish his reign. Some of those just similar parallels. Then we'll sing a song, and then we'll go on. We're go to break after we sing a song. After I find it. Hopefully I find the right version. Go back to the 80s for a second.
Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. Hallelujah. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. Let the earth rejoice. Let the earth rejoice. Let the earth rejoice. Let the people be glad that our God reigns. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. Let the earth rejoice. Let the earth rejoice. Let the earth rejoice. Let the people be glad that our God reigns. A fire goes before him and burns up all his enemies. The hills they melt like wax at the presence of the Lord. At the presence of the Lord. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. Let the earth rejoice. Let the earth rejoice. Let the earth rejoice. Let the people be glad that our God reigns. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. Let the earth rejoice. Let the earth rejoice. Let the earth rejoice. Let the people be glad that our God reigns. Heavens declare his righteousness. The people see his glory. For you, O Lord, are exalted over all the earth. Over all the earth. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. Let the earth rejoice. Let the earth rejoice. Let the earth rejoice. Let the people be glad that our God reigns. Our God
I should just finish up this section real quick. Just do one more slide. Kind of said a little bit about this, but Psalm 100 echoes Psalm 95. We see some parallels. Psalm 100 kind of answers the question that might have arisen from Psalm 95, which is, has Yahweh rejected succeeding generations, right, given his loathing of that first generation? And Psalm 100's answer is no, right, because it looks forward to his hesed that endures forever and his faithfulness that endures from generation to generation. Again, comforting the people with his sovereignty in 93 through 100. So book 4 reveals the Lord remaining in sovereign control over Israel's theocracy as he calls them to covenant faithfulness, 90 to 92, bringing up Moses, comforts them with his sovereignty in 93 through 100, and then we'll see in 101 through 106 when we come back from break that he commits himself to covenant faithfulness, really coming out of Psalm 100, that end of 100, that his hesed endures forever. So we're going to see that he's committing himself to covenant faithfulness. All right, so come back in 8:10-ish. All right, I'm ready. Sam. All right, getting back to it. So 101 and 106, we'll see him commit himself to covenant faithfulness, really to all the covenants. And as we go really from here through the rest of the Psalter, some people talk about a democratizing of the Psalter, how there's more of an emphasis on the people than David, which I don't think is right because you see David come back. And I think that also when people bring that up, where it's like, oh, it's more about emphasis on the people than on the kingship. It's like, well, even from the beginning, Psalm 1 and 2, the people and the king are intertwined. I mean, as one goes, the other goes. There's a symbiotic's not the right word. Symbiotic relationship between the people and the king, because he's the federal head. So even from the beginning, even going back to the Davidic covenant, 2 Samuel 7, it's not the Davidic kingship. The Davidic covenant isn't just for David's sake. It is for, and there's benefits for the people. So that critique isn't really hold water. So 101 to 106, we're going to see his covenant faithfulness, and we're going to see really actually reference to all the covenants, particularly 101 to 103. We see the reemergence of David. So book 3, we saw that 186, the prayer of David, but generally he's been absent since Psalm 72. Then 101 to 103 will portray David, the Davidite in waiting in 101, the Davidic petition, and the hope regarding Zion in 102, and the restorative mercy bestowed on David and the nation in 103, based on Yahweh's kingship. And that's what's really going to bring David back onto the scene from a narrative perspective, of course, from a bigger theological perspective, when we anticipate Christ's reign. So 101, all of a sudden we see David reemerge. Of David, a psalm. I will sing of hesed and justice to you, O Yahweh. I will sing praises. I will consider the way of the blameless. When will you come to me? I will walk within my house in the integrity of my heart. And again, even that reflecting back to 78, that David shepherded the people out of the integrity of his heart. I will set no vile thing before my eyes. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not cling to me. A crooked heart shall depart from me. I will know no evil. Whoever secretly slandered his neighbor, him I will destroy. Whoever has a haughty look and an arrogant heart, I will not endure. My eyes shall be upon the faithful of the land, that they may abide with me. He who walks in the way of the blameless is the one who will minister to me. He who practices deceit shall not dwell within my house. He who speaks lies shall not be established before my eyes. Every morning I will destroy the wicked of the land, to cut off from the city of Yahweh all the workers of iniquity. All right, that's the kind of king that David was, that the Davidites, those who, obviously David's the author of 101, but those who came after him, that was the kind of king they were meant to be, that they were supposed to be. And this is one of those great things about the Psalms, because the layers of context and meaning, because obviously David wrote it, and so there's meaning there, but then and he's inspired in his original autograph, but then also the compiler's inspired in how he's putting together book 4, and how there's that meaning for that generation of Israel post David. So we have, that meaning when David wrote it, but also the meaning of within book 4 during book 4 is either compiled during the divided kingdom or the exilic period. You might lean toward the exilic period because, as we'll see in like 104 to 106, the idea of restoration starts to come about. But can't 100% say for certain. So there's still that meaning that's being drawn for that generation through the inspiration that the compiler is doing as he puts this book 4 together. And this is one of those examples, because David wrote it, but just the context, we're looking forward to that reestablishment of the Davidic kings. And this is the kind of king that they're meant to have, that they're looking forward to. You could say 101 is kind of his domestic policy. How is he supposed to administer justice and shepherd the people out of the integrity of his heart? 102, we can't say, I can't die on that hill, that 102 is written by David, but there does seem to be a Davidic influence, because 101 and 103 are both written by David. And 102, a prayer of the afflicted when he is faint and pours out his complaint before Yahweh. You describe David probably like that. Again, you just can't die on the hill that David wrote it, but you can assume that at least we're supposed to read it through a Davidic lens because of 101 to 103. But again, if you want to say David didn't write it, I wouldn't fight you on that. O Yahweh, hear my prayer, and let my cry for help come to you. Do not hide your face from me in the day of my distress. Incline your ear to me in the day when I call. Answer me quickly. All right, so this afflicted one who's crying out to the Lord, petitioning for him to take action. Right, something reminiscent of what the king should act like. And then we have 103, again, a Davidic influence. As we talked about, was it last week before, how 103 is very much a reflection of Psalm 90. It's almost like David has Psalm 90 in hand when he's writing 103, reflecting on some of those themes, and then taking them in a positive direction. I don't know how I want to say that. Not positively. It's just like here, Moses is more like, man is nothing but grass. Like, oh, he's a little more depressed. Where David's like, man is but grass, and God sees our frailty. So there's more reflection on God's compassion when he looks and sees man's utter frailty. 19, Yahweh has established his throne in the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all. All right, bless Yahweh, you his angels, mighty in strength, who perform his word, obeying the voice of his word. Bless Yahweh, all you his hosts, you who serve him, doing his will. Bless Yahweh, all you his works, in all places of his rule. Bless Yahweh, O my soul. All right, so David understands that he's administering justice and kingship on behalf of the Lord, right? And we see this in Psalm 2 and within the Davidic covenant, right? That the Messiah has been given authority by Yahweh to rule. 110, rule. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. And then we see the scepter going forth, and we see him ruling in the midst of his enemies. But he's the visual representation of Yahweh's kingship on the earth, and that's what Christ will be, as one day heaven and earth are one, and the Davidic throne and Yahweh's throne are one and the same from Jerusalem over the new creation. 104 to 106 will recount the faithfulness and the forgiving rule of God. Right, he rules over creation in 104. He led his chosen people from Abraham through the Exodus in 105, and patiently forgave and redeemed them from from the Exodus through to the exile. So that's why we say Book 4 will be compiled probably during the exilic period. But within these Psalms, we also see references to all the covenants. Right, so for example, in 104, I think it's verse 5 through 9, he founded the earth. Now we'll just start with 104 and I'll just bring it out. But we actually have references to, as brief as they might be, we have references to, what are the covenants? Actually, before I tell you what the covenants are. The names of them. Mosaic, Noahic, Abrahamic, Davidic. So we got the Noahic, Abrahamic, Mosaic, one that you're forgetting, and the Davidic, and then eventually we'll get the new. But obviously that we're not there yet. What's the fifth covenant? So we got Abrahamic, Noahic, Abrahamic, Mosaic, Davidic. What's the other one? Nope, there is no such thing. There's no explicit Adamic covenant. You'll find references to it, but they try to piece it together. It tends to be an Amil talking point, but at the end of the day, there's no actual explicit reference to an Adamic covenant. You have what scholars will eventually call the first gospel, the proto-evangelical, whatever it is in Latin, evangelico or whatever, with Genesis 13:5, but you don't have an actual cutting. You don't have reference to a specific cutting of a covenant. Again, people will try to say these are the elements so that a reader would see Genesis 3 or Genesis 1 through 3 as a cutting of a covenant, but there's no actual explicit biblical reference to an Adamic covenant. And again, the amillennialists, I don't want to always pick on amils, but it's fun. Covenantal, the covenantal scholar, amil scholar, they generally try to find an Adamic covenant or covenant of grace, but there's no explicit reference. So just the explicit references, you have Noahic, Abrahamic, Mosaic, Davidic. Eventually you'll get the new covenant. But what's the last one? Nope. Okay, we'll get there. I'll let you keep thinking about it as we read. We'll get there, though. We'll get there. Psalm 104. It's a lot of reading, but it's fun. I bless Yahweh, O my soul. O Yahweh, my God, you are very great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty, wrapping yourself with light as a cloak, stretching out the heavens like a tent curtain. He lays the beams of his upper chambers in the waters. He sets up the clouds of his to be his chariot. He walks upon the wings of the wind. He makes his angels the winds, his messengers flaming fire. He founded the earth upon its place, so that it will not shake forever and ever. You covered it with the deep as with a garment. The waters were standing above the mountains. At your rebuke they fled. At the sound of your thunder they hurried away in alarm. The mountains went up, and the valleys went down, to the place which you founded for them. You set a boundary that they may not pass over, so they will not return to cover the earth. And again, that's either a reference, so they will not return to cover the earth, is either a reference to creation in Genesis 1, or it's a reference to the Noahic covenant, that they won't cover the earth again. Maybe I'm just saying it's Noahic because I want to, but it seems to be a Noahic, the whole mountains and valleys shifting that we know takes place during that period of the flood. Verse 10, he sends forth springs in the valleys. They flow between the mountains. They give water to every beast of the field, and the wild donkeys quench their thirst. Above them the birds of the heavens dwell. They give forth their voices among the branches. He gives water to the mountains from his upper chambers. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of his works. He causes the grass to grow for the cattle and the vegetation for man's cultivation, to bring forth food from the earth, and wine which makes man's heart glad, to make his face glisten more than oil, and food which sustains man's heart. The trees of Yahweh are satisfied, the cedars of Lebanon which he planted, where the birds build their nest, and the stork's homes is in the fir trees. The high mountains are for the wild goats, the cliffs are a refuge for the Sephanim. He made the moon for the seasons. The sun knows the place of its setting. You appoint darkness so that it becomes night, in which all the beasts of the forest creep about. The young lions roar to go after their prey and to seek their food from God. When the sun rises, they gather together and lie down in their dens. Man goes forth to do his work and to his labor until evening. How numerous are your works, O Yahweh! In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your possessions. This is the sea, great and broad. There the creeping things are without number, creatures both small and great. There the ships move along, and Leviathan, which you have formed to play in it. Right, this is the great sea serpent. They all wait for you, to give them food in due season, to give to them, they gather it up, and you open your hand, they are satisfied with good. You hide your face, and they are dismayed. You take away their spirit, they breathe their last and return to the dust. You send forth your spirit, they are created, and you renew the face of the ground. Let the glory of Yahweh endure forever. Let Yahweh be glad in his works. He looks at the earth, and it trembles. He touches the mountains, and they smoke. I will sing to Yahweh throughout my life. I will sing praise to my God while I have my being. Let my musings be pleasing to him. As for me, I shall be glad in Yahweh. Let sinners be consumed from the earth. Let the wicked be no more. Bless Yahweh, O my soul. Praise Yah. Again, starting to reflect that he rules over all of creation. And in 105, we're going to see how he is faithful and forgiving, leading the people from the time of Abraham to the Exodus. 105, oh, give thanks to Yahweh. Call upon his name. Make known his acts among the people. Sing to him. Sing praises to him. Muse on all his wondrous deeds. Boast in his holy name. Let the heart of those who seek Yahweh be glad. Inquire of Yahweh and his strength. Seek his face continually. Remember his wondrous deeds which he has done, his miracles and the judgments uttered by his mouth. O seed of Abraham, his servant, O sons of Jacob, his chosen ones. He is Yahweh our God. His judgments are in all the earth. He has remembered his covenant forever, the word which he commanded for 1,000 generations, which he cut with Abraham, and his oath to Isaac. Then he confirmed it to Jacob for a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant, saying, to you, I will give the land of Canaan as a portion of your inheritance. When they were only a few men in number, of little account and sojourners in it, that they wandered about from nation to nation, from kingdom to another people, he permitted no man to oppress them, and he reproved kings for their sakes. Do not touch my anointed ones, and my prophets do no evil. And he called for a famine upon the land. He broke the whole staff of bread. He sent a man before them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. They afflicted his feet with fetters. He himself was laid in irons. Until the time that his word came to pass, the word of Yahweh refined him. The king sent and released him. The ruler of peoples sent and set him free. He set him as lord of his house and ruler over all his possessions, to imprison his princes at will, that he might teach his elders wisdom. Then Israel came to Egypt, and Jacob sojourned in the land of Ham. And he caused his people to be very fruitful, and he caused them to be stronger than their adversaries. Verse 25, he turned their heart to hate his people. To deal craftily with his slaves, he sent Moses his servant and Aaron, whom he had chosen. They set forth the words of his signs among them and miracles in the land of Ham. He sent darkness and made it dark, and they did not rebel against his words. He turned their waters into blood and caused their fish to die. Their land swarmed with frogs, even in the chambers of their kings. He spoke, and there came a swarm of flies and gnats in all their territories. He gave them hail for rain and flaming fire in their land. He also struck down the vines and their fig trees, and he scattered the trees of their territory. And he spoke, and locusts came, and creeping locusts without number, and they ate all the vegetation in their land, and they ate up the fruit of their ground. He also struck down the firstborn in their land, the first of all their vigor. Then he brought them out with silver and gold, and there was none among his tribes who stumbled. Egypt was glad when they went out, for the dread of them had fallen upon them. He spread a cloud for a covering and fire to give light by night. They asked, and he brought quail, and he satisfied them with the bread of heaven. He opened the rock, and water flowed out. It ran in the dry places like a river. He remembered his holy word with Abraham, his servant. He brought his people out with joy, his chosen ones with a shout of joy. He gave them also the lands of the nations, that they might take possession of the fruit of the people's labor, so they might keep his statutes and observe his laws. Praise Yah. We have this retelling of Israel's history from Abraham to the Exodus, and then briefly into the Promised Land. It's focusing more on Yahweh and his faithfulness and his forgiving role, whereas 106 will focus more on his forgiving and redemption because of the people's sin. 106, praise Yah. Oh, give thanks to Yahweh, for he is good, for his hesed endures forever. Who can speak of the mighty deeds of Yahweh? Or who can make all his praise to be heard? How blessed are all those who keep justice, and he who does righteousness at all times. Remember me, O Yahweh, in your favor toward your people. Visit me with your salvation, that I may see the goodness of your chosen ones, that I may rejoice in the gladness of your nation, that I may boast with your inheritance. We have sinned with our fathers. We have committed iniquity. We have acted wickedly. Our fathers in Egypt did not consider your wondrous deeds. They did not remember your abundant hesed, but they rebelled by the sea at the Red Sea. Yet he saved them for the sake of his name, that he might make his might known. Thus he rebuked the Red Sea, and it dried up, and he led them through the deeps as through the wilderness. So he saved them from the hand of the one who hated them, and redeemed them from the hand of the enemy. The waters covered their adversaries. Not one of them was left. Then they believed his words. They sang his praises. They quickly forgot his works. They did not wait for his counsel. They craved but craved intensely in the wilderness, and put God to the test in the wasteland. So he gave them their request, and sent a wasting disease among their lives. Verse 16, then they became envious of Moses in the camp, and Aaron and the holy ones of Yahweh, and the earth opened up and swallowed up Dathan, and covered up the company of Abiram. And the fire burned up in their company, and the flame consumed the wicked. They made a calf in Horeb. They worshipped a molten image. Thus they exchanged their glory for the image of an ox, that eats grass. They forgot God their Savior, who had done great things in Egypt, wondrous deeds in the land of Ham, and awesome things by the Red Sea. Therefore he said he would destroy them. Had not Moses, his chosen one, stood in the breach before him to turn away his wrath from eradicating them. Then they despised the pleasant land. They did not believe in his word, but grumbled in their tents. They did not listen to the voice of Yahweh, so he swore to them to make them fall in the wilderness, to make their seed fall among the nations, and to scatter them in the lands. Right? It's reflecting back to Psalm 95 that he swore in his wrath, right? You will not enter my rest. Right? He loathed that first generation. Right? They didn't learn the lesson of Psalm 78. Right? They continually rebelled against him. And remember the next covenant? What's the final covenant? That's the new covenant. That's the inauguration of the new covenant. So that's new covenant, Jeremiah 29:33. So we haven't got there yet. Old Testament covenants, Noahic, Abrahamic, Mosaic, Davidic, and what's the other one? That's good. No one's reading ahead. Good job. All right, 28. Then they joined themselves to Baal Peor and ate sacrifices to the dead. Thus they provoked him to anger with their actions, and the plague broke out among them. Then Phinehas stood up and interceded, and so the plague was checked, and it was counted to him for righteousness from generation to generation forever. Right, the last covenant, the Phinehaic covenant. The Phinehas covenant with Phinehas. It's just fun to say Phinehaic. That he won't lack a man to be the high priest will go through Phinehas. Right, it's going to become the root of a number of things, like when we get to the new covenant discussion in Jeremiah 31 through 33, that Levi won't lack a man. It's going to come up why it's another one of the reasons, not the only reason, it's one of those reasons why we have a millennial temple, because he needs to fulfill that aspect of the new covenant that he talks about in Jeremiah 31 to 33, that Levi won't lack a man, and this Phinehaic covenant that often gets skipped over. But this is the only other explicit reference to the covenant with Phinehas. So it's interesting that it's here at the end of book 4, because obviously 101 to 103, the reemergence of David, so the Davidic covenant, the potential reference to the Mosaic covenant in 104, is it creation or is it the Mosaic covenant with the receding of the water, not covering the mountains again? The Abrahamic covenant talked about in 105. Obviously, implicit within this is the Mosaic covenant. So it's like, is it more than mere coincidence that this is the only other scriptural reference to the Phinehaic covenant so clearly? Phinehaic. Oh, the Phinehaic covenant? Baal Peor, that would be Numbers 25? Number 25, number 26. Oh, I was right. Right, so remember in Numbers, you don't necessarily have to turn back to Numbers 25 if you don't want to, but if you do, you can. Just obviously keep your finger in 106. But remember, Numbers 22 through 24 is the Balaam incidents. And so he's a false prophet. They're like, hey, let's hire you, curse Israel. They pay him, but he goes to, the only thing he can do is bless Israel. And the king's like, hey, what am I paying you for? And Balaam's like, all I can do is say what the Lord's telling me I'm going to say. Like, that's all I got. That's all I got. Even as a false prophet, he knows, like, that's all I can communicate. So when you get the New Testament, you have a reference to, I think Peter references it, or Jude, one of the two, or both, the sin of Balaam. And in those references, again, I think it's Peter and Jude, there's a parallel to sexual immorality with the sin of Balaam that's there in Peter and Jude. And so what it seems with that connection, and then with what happens at Baal Peor in chapter 25 of Numbers, it's like Balaam gets done. There's this implied, again, I wouldn't die on this hill, but this is just implied because of that reference, that it's like Balaam tells the king, like, hey, I can't curse Israel. Obviously, I tried 4 times. But if you want to mess with Israel, sexual immorality is the way to mess with Israel, because it gets Israel every time. And it will get Israel every time throughout Israel's history. Solomon, yeah. Like sexual immorality, that's the way to go. So because of how that New Testament makes that connection of the sin of Balaam with sexual immorality, it seems to be this implied conversation. And because of chapter 25, because all of a sudden there's a bunch of women. And the Israelite men go after them. Okay? And so then 25 verse 6, then behold, one of the sons of Israel came and brought near to his brothers a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and the sight of all the congregation of the sons of Israel, while they were weeping at the doorpost of the tent of meeting. Right, so they Moses, they see the sin of the people, so they're at the tent of meeting, they're mourning over it, and this person this man comes with a Midianite woman in daylight and in their presence to some extent. Verse 7, and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw it, and he rose up from the midst of the congregation and took a spear in his hand, and he went after the man of Israel into the tent and pierced both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman, through the body. Then the plague on the sons of Israel was checked. So those who died of the plague was 24,000. Verse 10, then Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, has turned away my wrath from the sons of Israel, in that he was jealous with my jealousy among them, so that I did not consume the sons of Israel in my jealousy. Therefore say, behold, I give him my covenant of peace, and it shall be for him and his seed after him a covenant of perpetual priesthood, because he was jealous for his God and made atonement for the sons of Israel. Right, a perpetual priesthood. One of a number of reasons, not the only reason, why we need a millennial temple. Because then if you jump over to Jeremiah, we're done in Numbers, but if you jump over to Jeremiah 33, everyone likes the New Covenant where it's like, oh yeah, the church comes in, but people don't remember chapter 33. Jeremiah 33, starting verse 14. Behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I will establish the good word which I have spoken concerning the house of Israel and the house of Judah. In those days, at that time, I will cause a righteous branch of David to branch forth, and he shall do justice and righteousness on the earth. In those days, Judah will be saved, and Jerusalem will dwell in security. And this is the name by which she shall be called: Yahweh is our righteousness. Thus says Yahweh, David shall not have a man cut from sitting on my throne, sitting on the throne of the house of Israel. Verse 18, and the Levitical priest shall not have a man cut off from before me who is to offer burnt offerings, to offer up grain offerings in smoke, and to perform sacrifices continually. Then the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah, saying, thus says Yahweh, if you can break my covenant for the day and my covenant for the night, so that day and night will not be at their appointed time, then my covenant may also be broken with David my servant, so he will not have a son to reign on his throne. And with the Levitical priests, my ministers, as the host of heaven cannot be counted, the sand of the sea cannot be measured, so I will multiply the seed of David my servant and the Levites who minister to me. And the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah, saying, have you not seen what this people have spoken, saying, the 2 families which Yahweh chose he has rejected. Thus they have spurned my people from having a nation any longer in their sight. Thus says Yahweh, verse 25, if my covenant for day and night stand not, and my statutes for heaven and earth, I have not established. Then I would reject the seed of Jacob and David my servant, and not taking from his seed rulers over the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will return their fortunes, and I will have compassion on them. Right, but I will return their fortunes, and I will have compassion on them. Right, people love the references to David. Right, David won't like a man. David won't like a man. Right, if he could break his covenant with the day and the covenant with the night, right, then my covenant may also be broken with David. Of course, no, so that he will not like a son to reign upon his throne. Right, they like that part, but Levi won't lack a man. And that's rooted in the Phinehaic covenant. It's one of, again, not the only reason, but this isn't the class about the millennial temple. That's one of the reasons why we need a millennial temple, is the realization of the Phinehaic covenant. That he won't lack a man. Because Jeremiah 33, going back, starting really in 31, and the new covenant, it's part of the new covenant. You can't just take Luke's reasoning in the book of Hebrews and jettison the Abrahamic or the Levitical priesthood as its connection to the new covenant by simply pulling the Melchizedekian card, like boom, Melchizedek, like no more need for Levi. Like, that's not how that works. Right, because even in his earthly ministry, Jesus didn't go and make sacrifices because Levi still had a role. Levi still has a role, and we see that in Ezekiel taking place. Right? And because of the temple's connection to the Davidic covenant, when you read the book of Chronicles and whatnot, like, yeah. But you see that explicit reference in 106 to Phinehas. Right, then Phinehas stood up, verse 30, and interceded, and so the plague was checked, and it was counted to him for righteousness from generation to generation. So again, you have reference in 101 to 106, you have references to all the covenants. Like all the covenants, even the Phinehaic covenant. It's the only other place in Scripture. And again, is that mere the more coincidence? No, it's book 4, the de-escalation of the conflict, where he calls them to covenant faithfulness in 90 to 92. Then he's going to comfort them with his sovereignty, 93 to 101, and then he's committing himself to covenant faithfulness. Again, not just one covenant, all of them. Again, the new covenant won't be given until the days of Jeremiah, or it won't be described, and it's not inaugurated until Christ and the Lord's Supper. Then, of course, Luke and Paul is then quoting probably Luke's gospel there in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, that this is the new covenant inaugurated in my blood. Interesting, Luke and Paul are the only ones who say new covenant. The other ones just say this is the covenant inaugurated in my blood. Verse 32, they also provoked him to wrath at the waters of Meribah, so that it went badly with Moses on their account. Because they were rebellious against his spirit, he spoke rashly with his lips. They did not destroy the peoples as Yahweh commanded them, but they mingled with the nations. They learned their works. They served their idols, which became a snare to them. They sacrificed their sons and their daughters to the demons, and they shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and their daughters, whom they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan. And the land was polluted with the blood. Thus they became unclean in their works, and they played the harlot in their actions. Verse 40, so the anger of Yahweh was kindled against his people, and he abhorred his inheritance. Then he gave them into the hand of the nations. Those who hated them ruled them. Their nations, their enemies, oppressed them. They were subdued under their hand, and many times he would deliver them, but they were rebellious in their counsel. And so they sank down in their iniquity. Right? Even though he redeemed them, right? There'd be like Assyria and all these different enemies. Like this king does good, and they're good, but they continue to sink down into their iniquity. Yeah, even just that phrase, sink down in their iniquity, can have so much application, right, for us. It's something that it's like you just, without proper repentance, you just keep sinking. It's Romans chapter 1. It just keeps going, gets worse as a society, but also I think in our own individual lives. Nevertheless, verse 44, he looked upon their distress when he heard their cry of lamentation. He remembered for them his covenant and relented according to the abundance of his hesed. He also made them objects of compassion in the presence of their captors. Save us, O Yahweh, our God, and gather us from among the nations, to give thanks to your holy name and to revel in your praise. Blessed be Yahweh, the God of Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. And let all the people say amen. Praise Yah. Right, so particularly that 44 through 48 would kind of imply that 106, and thus the compilation of Book 4, is after they've been taken into captivity. Because verse 46, he made them objects of compassion in the presence of the captors. Verse 47, gather us from among the nations. So it seems that Book 4 is written, or not written, is compiled during the time of their exile. So where like Book 3 is compiled sometime during the divided kingdom, because it seems that the Davidic covenant has failed. 1 and 2. 1, definitely in David's lifetime. I think Book 2 is compiled. I think is when Solomon and David, that transition into Solomon's reign, that they sit down and compile it together because of Psalm 72, where it references that the prayers of David are now concluded, yet it's a psalm written by Solomon. I think it's the two of them writing it and compiling Book 2 together. Book 3 compiled sometime during the divided kingdom. Book 4 compiled during the exilic period. Those are just general frameworks. If you try to nail it down, I wouldn't die on some of those hills. But so Book 4, right, the de-escalation of the conflict. Book 4 reveals the Lord remaining in sovereign control over Israel's theocracy as he calls them to covenant faithfulness in 90 to 92. Again, the problem of the climax of Book 3, their problem is a Mosaic problem. He comforts them with his sovereignty. The Lord reigns. His kingdom is still functioning, and he's still going to establish it on the earth, and it's going to come about via David and the commitment to his covenant faithfulness. So he recommits himself to that covenant faithfulness in 101 to 106. And again, not just one covenant, but all 5 Old Testament covenants. And he will be faithful to all of them. So that's the de-escalation of the conflict. A message that is relevant for us today. So Book 5, we won't really spend too much time here. All right, it's the return of the king. Dun, 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 dun. Lord of the Rings, never mind. No, I'm good. Dun, yeah. Oh, yeah. I forget why I have these images in here sometimes. He is not bereft of lordship. I like when Gandalf says that. Just the word bereft. It's a fun word. Sometimes I watch things like Lord of the Rings or Star Trek just to find new words. So much fun. But bereft. Right? David, Christ, right? They're not bereft of lordship. Right? And so that's where we're going to pick up next time with the return of the king and Denethor looking mad. And questions, comments, concerns, screams of outrage. But yeah, the return of the king. Bereft. You know what's another fun word is inimitable. That's a fun word. Words I learned from Star Trek. Huh? Inimitable. Without the ability to be imitated. All right, if there's no questions, comments, concerns, or screams of outrage, I will close us in prayer. Father, thank you for this evening time to spend time in your word again, and to learn, to meditate, particularly today to focus on Book 4, a book we need just in our own lives, our own conflicts, our own, since we live so much in Book 3, where we see the prosperity of the wicked, where we may be tempted to be jealous, where we don't see the Davidic throne established yet, where we don't see Christ reigning yet. We need the de-escalation of Book 4. We need to be reminded that the Lord remains in sovereign control, that Yahweh reigns and that He is coming, and that He will be faithful to all His covenants. And we look forward to the day when you return and establish your throne upon the earth. We look forward to the return of the King, but also helps to learn from those lessons from Book 4 to find comfort, to commit ourselves to covenant faithfulness, not only the Mosaic covenant, but to be faithful to live godly lives, and look forward to the establishment of your kingdom, the realization of all your covenant promises that are going to be fulfilled when Christ comes and establishes His kingdom on the earth. Lord, thank you for your hesed, that it does endure forever, that you will be faithful to everything that you have said. You'll be faithful to your words to Noah. You'll be faithful to Abraham. You'll be faithful to Moses and to the nation of Israel. You'll be faithful to David. Lord, and that you will also be faithful to Phineas in your covenant with him. Lord, we pray that we would look upon the sun and the moon and remind ourselves of the new covenant, that your covenants cannot be broken, that your new covenant inaugurated in Christ's blood will bring about the realization of all your covenants. Lord, help us to meditate on your word, to apply it into our lives. Thank you for everyone here. Thank you for those who are online. Lord, help us all to grow in your word. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Oh, I thought you were going to bring up Lord of the Rings. Copyright, I get it. Just kidding.